are back on Inside the Marathon Project, the podcast that takes you inside the stories of the athletes, organizers, and dreamers shaping this one-of-a-kind marathon experience. I'm your host, Steve Sievert. I'll be joined along the way by TMP co-founder and CEO Ben Rosario. The reboot of the Marathon Project is happening this December, the 20th and 21st in Chandler, Arizona. And if you want more information or may even be considering being on the starting line yourself, check out all the details at marathonproject.com. Today's guest is someone who carved out his own unique path and persona in American distance running, Noah Droddy. If you followed the sport over the last decade, you undoubtedly know the look. The long flowing hair, the cool shades, and that mustache. I feel like it has to have its own vibe. But Noah was more than just a cult favorite. Guy had some wheels. 2:09 marathoner, multiple-time Olympic trials qualifier, and one of the standout performers at the first edition of the Marathon Project that saw a record number of U.S. men crack the 2:10 barrier. Last fall, he retired from professional running, leaving behind a career that was both maybe a little unconventional, maybe quite inspiring. And we're going to dive into the full arc here. We're going to talk about his start in the sport, some breakthrough races, some of those viral moments, why he decided to step away from the sport, and what it was like to be a fan favorite in the sport of running that doesn't always celebrate personality. So with that, no further ado, let's get him in here. Noah, welcome to Inside the Marathon Project.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Steve, you have the perfect podcast voice. So I apologize. I was not familiar with your game.
Well, I appreciate that. That's the only reason why Ben hired me. It's the pipes.
It's perfect. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I hope that. Thank you. All right. Well, I got to start out. Here's the obvious question. All right. And it'll be a two-parter here.
Sure.
What is the best part of being a retired professional runner?
Oh, the best part for me is I tell people that it's just nice not having to obsess all the time over stuff like food and sleep and just like the daily routine of life. I feel like I'm a lot more flexible now. I don't freak out if I don't have time to take a nap or if I don't have time to get a meal in. And so I really love and appreciate that flexibility that not having the rigid training schedule has provided me.
Maybe a little bit more brew, maybe a little fewer or more scoops of ice cream then?
No, I wouldn't say too much about my lifestyle has necessarily changed. It's just nice not to have to think about it.
No, I can completely appreciate that. All right,
Yeah.
So here's the flip side. What do you miss about training and racing as a pro?
That's a good question. I think when I retired, I was so ready to be done with it that I almost didn't reflect so much on what I would miss. But I miss race day mornings. I miss getting on the bus and having a police escort, to the line and getting your own tent in the back. And just that feeling that I was an important person on the start line and I could make an impact, and so as a retired athlete, I'm never going to be that fit again. I'm never going to have that professional athlete experience again. And those are some things that I'll really miss for sure, but not really enough to put the work in to do it again.
So you mentioned you were so ready to call it a career. So take us back to that time frame last fall. I believe the plan was, and you were training for, being on the line at the New York City Marathon, and then pretty significant pivot. Instead of lacing them up, you decided to unlace them for the last time. What went into that decision?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you're right. I was preparing for New York City Marathon. I'd signed a contract to run that race. And, in the thought process, I had dropped out of that race back in, 2022. I think I dropped out of New York City. And so when I was trying to select a race for that fall, I was trying to figure out what was going to make me the most excited, and kind of that redemption arc of going back to New York City and running well and kind of flipping the script on my last experience there was really exciting to me. And to be honest, training was going pretty fine. I was running well, maybe not totally up to my standards, but well enough where I felt like I could go there and have a good performance. But really just day in and day out, I started to notice that that kind of feeling of desperation for success that I used to have, the fire that I used to have when it came down to training and racing. It just wasn't really showing itself anymore. I still loved going to practice. I loved hanging out with my friends. And to some extent, I still loved running. But I just, when it came down to scoop that last 5 to 10% out of yourself, I just had trouble getting there. And that was always my superpower. And so when I realized it wasn't there anymore, I thought, I think it's probably time to take a step back.
I mean, all professions, all jobs come with their share of nuances and trappings and just stuff that you have to deal with. But I'm kind of fascinated by the life of an individual athlete, and especially in the sport of running. There are no guaranteed contracts. This isn't the NBA where the last guy on the bench is making millions of dollars. Prize money and livings are measured in the tens of thousands, not the millions. What was it like to experience that and go through that lifestyle to kind of be that working class runner who made it to an extremely high level of the sport?
Oh, that's a pretty loaded question. It was at times really amazing and at times really stressful, so I went from, in 2015, I moved out to Colorado with just the stuff that could fit in my 2007 Kia Rio. The car I still drive today. And those are all the possessions I had, right? And I was sleeping on a mattress I found on Craigslist free. I was working at the running store, working at the gym until I got my first contract. And then I was just a runner for a while, and that was great. But I had so much stress about trying to stay a professional runner that I almost didn't enjoy the opportunity to train full time. And then after my Saucony contract, there were a couple of years where I worked and ran. And then ultimately when I finished my career, I was just running. And so it was kind of a mix between being very grateful to have reached a certain level where I had the opportunity to train full time, but that time also allowed a lot of like negative self-talk to creep in for me, where I started internalizing a lot more pressure. And I think as I went through my career, I was running like a little less and less free and a little less and less for me that I had in the beginning because of these pressures I was kind of placing on myself to be like a quote unquote professional runner, And so it was kind of your classic double-edged sword, blessing and curse situation for me.
So 2 words that I want to drill into. I heard pressure and I heard stress, because that is the life of a professional runner. You're running for your next shoe contract, or you're running for a contract to begin with. How did you handle that stress and pressure through those years?
Not very well, Steve. No, I had great people in my corner. I had a great coach in Richie Hansen. I had a great team at the Roots Running Project, a great agent, Josh Cox, and my wife, Emma, like all my friends. And so when I talk about pressure, like this was almost all self-imposed pressure. Like I really was not getting pressure from external places. I just wanted to live up to my own expectations of myself and live up to the expectations that I had created in the heads of other people to some extent too. And, that expression, like you're only as good as your last race. And I think I probably believed that a little too much. And, so yeah, I think I lived day to day by how the last workout had gone or how the last run had gone. I think for a lot of my career, I was dealing with, a pesky Achilles injury, especially for the last, 3 or 4 years of my career. And I was very day to day with that entire time. And so that added on to it, just being like, am I going to be healthy enough to do my next race? And so really the best I ever felt in sport was, immediately after a good race, because felt like I could exhale, I could relax. And also I had a period of time where I didn't have to worry about the next thing. And so, but to some extent that stress is really good for me. I think I really strived under pressure. Like I thrived under pressure, and I could rise to those moments. But then the day-to-day grind, it wasn't always productive mentally.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and go back to the Marathon Project. appreciate, and I know Ben will as well, that you're wearing the gear
Yep.
from look at that, there it is, wearing
Yep.
the gear from the 2020 race. Such an unusual time during the pandemic. What was the energy going into that race and heading to the starting line?
Well, first of all, I think we were all just grateful to have an opportunity. I mean, there was a really good chance that year was going to be just a total write-off, which would have been especially tough for me because I had missed the 2020 marathon trials with an injury. And so I really hadn't, a lot of people got to race the trials at least before everything was shut down. I didn't get that opportunity. And so when the marathon project came on to the theater of distance running, I really looked at it as my own personal Olympic trials. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to have this chance for redemption to get out there and like have a race this year. The training and running has not been for nothing. And it was just a perfect opportunity to go out there and just absolutely lay it on the line with no consequences, right? There were no appearance fees. There were no contracts on the line other than my shoe contract, which maybe we can get into another time. But it just felt like such a special opportunity to just run my heart out with no consequences. And that just felt really good to me. And I took advantage of that.
Well, the boss has joined us. I want to give him an opportunity to
Hey, Ben.
say hello.
Hey, Noah, I apologize to you guys and to the listeners here. I had another call that I had to be on, but I'm excited to join. Steve, quickly, what have I missed? What has Noah brought to the table here?
Nothing. Noah's brought absolutely nothing to the table.
That is so not true. We've only been recording for 11 minutes and we've got a lot of gold. You'll have to go back and watch the full show.
Can I tell the story of the first time I met Noah?
Absolutely.
I mean, to my knowledge, anyway. I don't have a great memory, but Noah, you tell me if I'm right or wrong. It was the Phoenix Rock and Roll Arizona Half Marathon in 2016 as we were building toward the 2016 Olympic Trials Marathon. Is that right?
Yeah, so I took that. That was my last chance qualifier for the marathon trials.
And you got it, right? Or you didn't? You did, right?
I did get it. Yeah, I got it.
I thought you did, yeah. And you came up and talked to me, and I think Ben Bruce ran. So it was Ben and I down there, and so that's where I got to know you. So then when you went viral, at the track trials, that was, I already knew you, so it was fun for me to see that happen because you did leave an impression on me. You were such a cool dude and so positive and fun. And, you stayed that way your entire career. And I think that's what everybody would say about you. So, it's pretty cool to have so many fans out there. I hope you felt that way.
Oh, for sure. And, thank you for reminding me of that race. I'd been like couch surfing for like 3 days before that race. I was staying at this like really shitty Motel 6 that was full of cockroaches. It was really horrible. But I remember finishing that race and like walking back to the room and just I obliterated the entire family like data plan on my phone just because I was so excited and texting everybody. But that was the first big race for me. It was only a couple months after I moved to Boulder. And then all of a sudden I had to like run a marathon after that or try to run one.
So we're going to get into that one a little bit later, but I want to jump back to the setup that you were just mentioning leading into TMP 1.0. You described it then as your own personal Olympic trials. What were your expectations going in?
I don't know that I had expectations. I just, and I've been telling this to athletes now who are considering running the marathon project, but you get very few opportunities in the sport to test the outer limit of your potential, like factoring in perfect course, perfect weather. And so those were the factors that really excited me heading into the first edition. Like I knew the course was going to be fast. Like we were pretty sure the weather was going to be perfect. And I just knew that nobody had anything to lose. So we were all just going to go for it. We were all just going to rip. I think the pace was set at like 64:30 through halfway. And this is back when 2:09 was good. And so I just knew that this was going to be the perfect opportunity to run fast. And I may never get something like that again. And so I don't know that I had performance expectations other than putting myself in it and just like holding on as long as I could. I think if in an alternate universe, if I would have gone out and done that and blown up and run a 2:14, I would have been okay with that. Obviously that didn't happen, and it kind of changed my life. Right. And so it was just one of those opportunities that you had to take advantage of. And so I was ready to go in a little over my head for the opportunity to like put up a big time.
Special day for you, 2:09:09. Special day as well with 7 U.S. men breaking 2:10. So I'm fascinated by as the race was unfolding, you're obviously seeing the splits. You've got a good feel for the potential of a really special day when you hit the finish line. Was there any chatter among you guys? Was there any talk about let's work together to try to hit these times? Bring us inside how that race was unfolding.
There's a few moments of chatter that I remember. I remember because the group was huge, Ben. How many people do you think were in the lead pack at halfway?
Oh, I think at least 25.
Yeah, say 25. But my first recollection of chatter is at mile 1. We went through in like 5 flat or something, and somebody in the pack just yells, "Too slow!" And I was like, relax, bud. I was just like, what is this? Too slow. I was like, we've got 25 miles left. Like, I found it so absurd that I just like started laughing. And, from that point, I think it was James McCurdy in the lead car, and he would yell the splits out the window at every mile marker. And so we had a very good idea of the pace we were on. And in my brain, every time I heard that positive affirmation of like, oh, that was a good split, it just kind of built up momentum in my body. I also remember coming through halfway and hearing 64:25 or something, and just all of a sudden being aware of how many guys were still there and how many footsteps I could hear. I'd never had that I've never been in a race like that before. There were guys in that pack who had set half marathon personal bests through the first half of the race. And I was running next to Jared Ward, and we were both just like, we said a couple sentences about how insane it was that all these people were here. And then the talking kind of died down as we as we progressed in. And it just was one of those kind of attritional races where as we stayed on the pace for longer, it just kind of got quieter and quieter around us until there weren't too many of us left.
What was the feeling when you hit the finish line?
Nausea. I think famously nausea. To be totally honest, I ran the soul out of my body that day. And so I crossed the finish line and collapsed into the dirt. And I have just a vague recollection of kind of rolling around and my wife, Emma, running over to me. And everybody was just so excited, not only for me, but there was a really clear understanding that what had just happened was like a historic day for specifically American distance running. Nobody had ever run that fast before all at once.
You mentioned how it changed your life. How so?
Well, in the short term, in a really negative way, because I ran that, and then 10 days later, I was cut from my Saucony contract. I don't think that performance really had anything to do with that, but that's kind of a joke answer. The true answer is that it prolonged my career, right? It changed my life in one. I feel like I was given the gift of truly understanding where my like outlier potential really was. Like I had that chance to know that when I ran as hard as I could and everything going in went well, this is what I can accomplish. And so I was given peace of mind that way. Of course, I still thought I could run faster, but history is the true guide. But also, I was 30 at the time when we ran that, which is like kind of, people start wondering if you're on your last legs at 30. But having such a great race at that point in my life, it really, even though my first relationship with a sponsor ended, it opened the door with me with Salomon, and I got to extend my career for 3 or 4 years and have a lot of amazing experiences running with that company and on my team. And so I think if the Marathon Project doesn't happen, I'm a 2:11 guy, 2 years before that or whatever, I think I would have had a harder time really stretching my longevity in the sport. So I think it was really a big pivot point for me.
Appreciate you sharing that. Well, let's go back a little farther and talk about your early career, you graduated from DePauw University in 2013, but didn't immediately pursue running as a pro. What was going through your head at that time, and what did you think the plan was post-graduation?
That's a good question. It's almost kind of funny to look back on it because, like, I feel like I had a plan, but there was absolutely no plan. But yeah, I graduated from DePauw University in 2013, as you mentioned. I was just back on campus last weekend for my coach's 30th anniversary season. So I finished fourth at DePauw Alumni Run, so another top 5 there. Feeling pretty good about that one. But yeah, when I graduated from college, I was pretty sure my running career was over. I had been good, but not great. A couple D3 All-Americans, but nothing that would indicate, I would have thought it, I thought it was insane to even like consider running at all. And so I really didn't much. I moved to Chicago and did an internship, which was fun. Didn't take it super seriously, did not get the job. And then I moved back to Indianapolis and did landscaping, and then ultimately worked at the shoe store. Pretty familiar path. But this whole time I was kind of starting to ask myself, like, what's next? Like, is this just what life is? Like, I'm just going to do this for the next forever. I was doing fine. I had good friends and stuff, but I was like, am I just going to like drink and work at the shoe store for the next 50 years? To make a really long story short, I went and did the John Muir Trail in California. So I was like on the road for like 6 weeks with a couple of my best friends. And that really like opened my mind up to the like, okay, there's like something more out there that I can do. And then I started this self-reflection process of really asking myself, like, what am I good at? Like, what do I have to offer? What's special about me? And running was kind of the only thing. I'd always been known as the runner. And so I started thinking, is there potential there? And I was like, yeah, there's definitely potential there. I was running 50 or 60 miles a week in college. Like, I was only getting better. And so I guess I just adopted running as like the vehicle I could use to go experience something else and go move somewhere else and kind of change my situation. So then the plan became to do that. I emailed a bunch of coaches. Only one got back to me. That was Richie Hansen, who had just started the Roots Running Project in Boulder. And he said if I came out, he would coach me. And that's what I did like a few weeks later. And
then you got started on packing the Kia at that point.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a whole lot to pack. And so, but I threw the guitars in there and I drove, 16 hours west.
And you stated pretty early in your relationship with Richie and Roots that you wanted to qualify for the marathon trials, right?
Yeah, that was my ultimate ambition. And, so this was November that I moved out. And so January would have been the last chance to qualify. So I wasn't even thinking about qualifying for the marathon trials in 2016. I was thinking qualify for the marathon trials in 2020. That was my goal. I had just run 66 minutes and a half at Indy Monumental in November before I moved. And so I was kind of like, that was my shot. I'm not quite good enough to run sub 65, but that was a 2-minute personal best. I was happy with it. I'd been doing some training in Indianapolis before I left. So I moved out here, but like I was so lucky. As soon as I got here, like the training just clicked and I was doing stuff. We were in the V-Hill system at the time. So we're running 5 quality workouts a week. Insane. It's probably why my body hurts so much, but I was lucky that I responded to the training immediately. And I was putting up just numbers in practice that at altitude that I never had touched or approximated in Indianapolis. I don't know if that was just a change of motivation or what, but all of a sudden we were like, you know what, we should take a shot. So that's when, to go back a little bit, that's when we went out to Rock and Roll, Arizona. And I remember that race pretty vividly because I ran like by myself the whole time, but I could see the leaders up ahead. Like Ben was up there with the leaders. Ben Bruce was up there with the leaders. And I was like, if I can just keep them in sight, and I think they ended up running 62, 63, something like that. But I could see them. And so I ran 64:20 or whatever. And mission accomplished.
And I want to confirm something. That was the last possible day when the window was open for you to qualify for the marathon trials. Is that right?
Yeah. It was at least like the last weekend, and that would honestly kind of become a theme for me. That wasn't the last time that would happen.
So Noah, leaving it late at that one for sure. So what was the feeling when you crossed the finish line and you know you actually did it? You're going to have an opportunity to toe the line at the 2016 marathon trials.
Oh, I was elated. There's a picture of me just crossing the finish line, just like screaming, just, I had a few moments like that in my career too, but, yeah, I was just so happy. I was just so happy. It was a time in my life where my limits were being constantly redefined. I don't think I was ever an athlete who got out over my skis. Like, I was pretty realistic about who I was and what I could do. And if that were going to change, I would have to prove it to myself through results. And that was one of those days that just like, you wake up the next day and the world is totally different. Like, I was like, oh, I can do anything I want to do now. Yeah, it was just such a fun time.
And take us back to the trials themselves then, because that ended up being a DNF. But you were ahead of schedule. As you mentioned, you were thinking about qualifying in 2020. So did that fact that you were ahead of your plan take a little sting out of that DNF, or what exactly did you take away from that race?
Yeah, from a fun time to not such a fun time. In the moment it hurt really bad. Like, I had 3 weeks between the two races back in Boulder, and we basically just added a long run, to try to get me ready. I didn't practice nutrition at all. Like, I hadn't done any marathon training, or we just didn't have time. And so I got there and just, it was very much like a do your best. There were no performance expectations, but I'm not somebody who can't have performance expectations, right? And so I went out there and I was like, I think I can run 216, 217. And, I blew up and eventually was jogging so slow that I've never been like a finish at all costs guy, so I just decided to step off. But I definitely like shed some tears after that, because it was very meaningful to me to be on that stage, be around athletes of that caliber for the first time. And I really wanted to like show that I belonged there. But I think it was just kind of premature for me to feel like that. I really, if I could go back and talk to myself, I'd be like, hey man, just go do a lap of the course, like wave to the crowd, which I did, and then just like step off before it gets bad and like go back to the drawing board. But it taught me a lesson about like what marathoning is, and also exposed me to that level of race. So the next time that happened, it wasn't such a shock to the system. But I was bummed, but I didn't linger on it too long because I was not like, the goal wasn't to be successful there. The goal was to get there.
And then jump ahead to the track trials then in the same year. You get a little airtime there. I mean, you know where I'm going with this question, right? There was a lot of chatter on social media, and that was certainly a viral moment. And then Runner's World weighed in with this, and I'm sure you can remember this, but for our viewers and listeners, I'm going to read it. In the lineup of clean-shaven, big brand-sponsored distance stars hoping to make the U.S. Olympic team on a Friday night in Eugene, Oregon, the Joe Dirt doppelganger with bouncing locks and a killer stash didn't fit. What was your reaction to all that attention, the coverage from Runner's World? I mean, how did that hit you in the moment?
I had a lot of fun with it. Like, some of my friends were actually kind of mad. They were like, they don't know you. Why are they saying that stuff about you? But I was like, I found it all in good fun. And yeah, that interview with Kit Fox I did after, I don't think I really even understood what I was doing. Like, I was like, oh, somebody wants to talk to me. I think I had 4 beers like during the interview. Like, looking back on it, it's like, I like, it was just insane. Like, I have no idea he probably like took it easy on me after what I was doing there. But, the attention was awesome. My parents were there. Like, I remember eating at a restaurant in Eugene. They were replaying the 10K and people were kind of looking up at the screen, and then they started looking over at me. And it was just kind of a surreal experience because the race went terribly. Like, I got outkicked for last place, down the home stretch. And so, similar to the marathon trials, I had this like a deep devastation of like not performing on that stage again. But the real joy was in qualifying, which I did with an NAZ athlete, Scott Smith, at the Portland Track Festival, traded laps. It was just another one of those redefining moments that were super special for both of us, I think. but anyway, the level of attention after that changed my career. Like all of a sudden I was a known quantity, and even at that time, more so now, but you needed to have results, but also you needed to have kind of an edge or a persona or something marketable about your story. And so that's what the trials did for me. It just opened me up to a much larger audience. And so I wasn't just my times anymore. I was the two factors. And that's kind of when we started getting interest from sponsors, and I was able to like be a professional athlete, which seems so like crazy like that was never the goal, but it became a reality.
And you embraced it. You took advantage of it. So I
Yeah.
want to know a little bit about the appearance, because the appearance obviously became a big part of your brand and your persona. First of all, where's the hair, man? When did that get cut?
Yeah, I never thought about the growing of the hair. Like that was never a thought. It was just natural and what I felt like doing. But the cutting of the hair was like a more, spiritual process. And it's been a few years now, but I think I really grew tired of being of people feeling like they knew me before they met me, because they like knew that I was like the long-haired guy, right? I wanted to like separate myself from that character. I hesitate to call it a character, because that wasn't the intention, but that was the reality for a lot of people. And so when I finally decided to cut it, and I've kept it pretty short since, it was really like liberating for me. I felt like I could kind of start over and like introduce people to who I am without that preconceived notion of just like the hippie stoner guy, which wasn't far off, but like, it was, it was nice to have a fresh start.
Did you feel lighter out there when you were running without the hair?
Oh, I can't tell you how like different of a sensation it is. First of all, you use way less shampoo, like your hair gets dry instantly, and like running without a hat on is like crazy. Yeah. So I don't regret it. But I do like I tell people about how long my hair used to be, in kind of like a old man yells at clouds way of, like I used to be cool,
How much of a factor do you think was being a D3 athlete in your popularity and in sort of that fan focus?
I think it served me in a lot of different ways. I think in terms of my competitive mindset, I never felt entitled to anything, because I was never given anything. We bought our own shoes. Like it was just, the program was just, if you want to work and show up, you provide the resources and show up and do that. And so I think it served me well that way. In terms of popularity, I think a lot of athletes found resonance in my story of being able, you don't have to be the blue chip D1 guy to go on and have success. Like you can, if you love to run and you love to compete and you're willing to show up every day and kind of see the process through, there's really just no telling where it ends. You just don't know until you go for it, which was kind of my original goal all along, just to see where the outermost edge was. And I think, people in Division III saw that I was trying to do that. And, it's one of those stories that anybody can insert themselves into and picture themselves as doing that. So it resonated. It wasn't really even my story. It was just like it was everybody's story, which made it really fun.
Exactly, because it's that relatability that leads to that connection, and that's why you're able to develop such a following. That's great. So were there moments in all of that sort of fandom and when you were getting all of this attention where it became a little bit weird and you're like, okay, this is a little bit too much? Were there any interactions with fans that you had where you had that reaction?
I'm trying to think if there maybe was at the time, but also it's like, I was very aware of like, I'm not like an NFL player, right? I'm not like an NBA all-star. Like I can go to the grocery store and like not get mobbed by fans. And so anytime I was recognized, like I remember it happened at the airport once, and that like blew my mind that somebody recognized me at the airport. It was like in the airport bathroom, which is kind of strange. I was really grateful for it whenever somebody wanted to come up and like take a picture or talk to me. Like, I hope anybody who met me during that time would say that I was gracious with my time and interested in what they were up to, and happy to share a moment with them. I never felt annoyed by it, because how lucky are we as professional runners to have anybody at all interested in our story? It's a sport where I think we're often too self-interested and too closed off and too protective of our energy that we really have trouble creating a fan base at all. And here I was gifted this fan base. What am I going to be, an asshole? It's like, and so, no, I think so. No, I was really grateful for all that. I think over time it bled into me putting more pressure on myself, which I kind of discussed earlier in the show. And so that was really the only downside, but I was always happy to connect with people, especially like right before races. That always used to get me really fired up. Like when, like, Ben, how they'll put the pros out in front, and then like the amateur field will line up right behind us, and so they can see us kind of doing strides and stuff. There were always a bunch of people in that corral who knew who I was and were just like, come on, Noah, go get him. No. And I was just like, yeah, let's go. So I really benefited from that energy, I think.
And is gratitude one of the reasons why you're still on social and kind of still connecting with fans who are interested in what you're up to?
I don't know. I don't really post on social much anymore. I think I really burned out on the whole thing. I'm still happy to like engage with anybody who wants to reach out, but I also understand the sport moves on. I'm just not an important character in the sport anymore. I think I have value in some of the other things I do, whether it's with D3 Glory Days or my work with Omius now, or my role as a mentor to guys on the Roots Running Project. But in terms of me being like an important figure in elite distance running, it's just not the reality anymore. And so the level of attention there is different. So now I'll run into people sometimes and we'll have conversations like this where they remember the 2016 trials, and I'll just, yeah, man, those were the days, and so but in terms of just my social media presence, I don't really feel any like obligation to a fan base anymore, but I'm happy to chat about good old times if anybody wants to.
You touched on a couple of elements of your life just a minute ago. So tell us how you're filling your days right now, what you're focusing on. And I'm curious. So you obviously did well in the alumni race. Are you still putting in some miles? I mean, that might augur for a comeback here now.
Yeah, don't call it a comeback. Yeah, I mean, I'm still living a pretty active lifestyle. I'm running probably 5 days a week, 35 to 40 miles, most weeks. And the thing is, I'm still in Boulder, and so much of my social community is tied up in the running community. And it's just that time I get to go spend with friends where there's no phones. We can catch up. We can just have deep conversations. And sometimes that's the only time I get to see these particular friends in a given week, because it's hard to get away from the house, And so I meet up with friends. I'll go to the track club, which is the team my wife Emma is on. I'll drop in on some of their practices, and every now and then get baited into some hard reps. And so that's kind of what it is, and that's all I want it to be. I'm not really interested in pursuing my limits anymore, but I do like being active and jumping into workouts and that feeling you get after running hard. So I'm doing that. Em and I have a kid on the way in late January. So that's like definitely part of the professional runner arc, is to like retire and immediately have a kid. So we're super excited about that. And then, after about a 6 month soul searching process after I retired, I landed a job in business development with Omius. So that's what I'm doing from 9 to 5. And then the podcast D3 Glory Days is going strong, 6 years now. And so we still do a weekly show, a newsletter. We'll be going to a few different events on the cross country schedule this fall, and ultimately do the commentating for the NCAA on the live stream. So now that I say all this consecutively, I actually do feel like I have kind of a lot going on.
Yeah, you definitely do. Yeah. Definitely do. And congratulations to you and your wife.
Thank you. We joke that he's going to be a D2 superstar because Emma was a D1 All-American and I was a D3 All-American. So take the average.
Yeah. So right in the middle. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Setting expectations.
But the reality is I don't really care if he'll grow up to be a runner. Like I tell people he can do whatever sport he wants. He can play soccer. He can play football. As long as he's getting in 80 a week, I need 80 miles a week, and he can do whatever he wants. I'm not going to be a hard ass about it.
Clearly not. No, only 80 miles a week. Boy, I look forward to hearing those stories. All right, so clearly through your podcast, you're following the sport. You're still, connected to the running community there in Boulder. I'm curious, how much are you following the pro scene these days, if at all?
I'm following it, pretty closely, and part of that is tied up in my work with OMIUS. Part of my outreach strategy is interacting with professional athletes, and that was definitely something I was looking forward to doing in my job search, whether that was in the marketing sphere or anywhere. It was just like having an opportunity to still be involved in the sport. I didn't need it to be like about me, and I didn't need to like be in the room all the time, but I wanted an opportunity to like try to provide value to athletes in some way. And so, yeah, I'm definitely keeping tabs on results, and so many of my good friends are still competitive runners, right? And so I try to mentor wherever possible, provide advice, and keep an eye on their races. I think I follow it less obsessively for sure than I used to, especially as I started getting kicked down that all-time list. You don't even want to watch anymore if you go, every time there's a marathon, I just look worse and worse. But yeah, no, I would say I'm more plugged in than the average person still.
Well, to that point, that was a topic that I wanted to get into. The sport, and particularly marathoning, has exploded since you were on the starting line at the Marathon Project in 2020. I mean, the 208, the 209 time that you and your contemporaries were running, I mean, that was a world-class time. And now we're down here and we're seeing races being won in 202, 203, the 204s become even more common. Do you think we're going to get to a point in maybe the not too distant future where we see a step change even lower than that? Or have we reached a point with technology and the shoes and the nutrition and the training where this is going to be the plateau for a while before we see a further sort of evolution that we've seen over the last several years?
It's always going to get faster. I mean, I think the margins may shrink to some extent, but you just never know. I mean, the leaps that we've seen in nutrition and footwear technology, the marathon's not really even an endurance event anymore. Like, I think it was Scott Fablo who said like the marathon is basically a 30K race now, or like you should approach it like a 30K race. And never felt that way to me, but maybe it feels like that to some people. So yeah, I think those things will continue to improve. Like the training will continue to improve, and every now and then we'll get a generational talent on a flat course in Chandler, Arizona on a perfect weather day, and you never know what can happen. So I expect the needle to continue moving.
Do you think there's an opportunity as the sport continues to evolve that we could potentially see an American on the podium in LA in 2028?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, his name is Connor Mantz. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a good handful of Americans right now who all are, sub 208 capable. And I think once you're in that ballpark, it doesn't really matter if your PB is 203 or if it's 208 on the right day, depending on where people are in preparations or health, like it could all equalize. And so I wouldn't be shocked at all if some runner out of Utah steps up onto the podium in LA.
They're cooking something in Utah. There's no doubt about it there with Ed Eyestone and his group. All right, I want to segue into this. So you said in an interview some years ago that after my career, I want to set records in wet denim. Do you remember that one?
Did I say that?
You did, at least according to the internet, you did. Has that happened yet? Have you taken a crack at like this ultra fast mile in wet denim?
Oh, absolutely not. I think my what I was probably poking fun at is like the obsession of like, blue jean miles and stuff like that. And I think I'd always see those record attempts and I would just like, why don't we get those jeans just like soaking wet? Wouldn't that be more impressive? Like anybody can do it in dry denim. Let's soak those things down and see how you do. So I think that was my thought process there, but I do not volunteer as tribute for that one.
All right. Very good. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, Noah. Really appreciate the time. Wish you the best of luck in all your pursuits. Can't wait to tune in again to D3 Glory Days. Encourage our viewers to check that podcast out, and just really appreciate you joining us today on Inside the Marathon Project. Yeah,
fun to walk down memory lane with you guys. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to watching with bated breath the Marathon Project 2.0 in December. It
is one race, one project, one pursuit. It is the Marathon Project. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Inside TMP.